The room appears steady, offering no indication that anything has shifted from where it was.
Attention moves across the space without finding a reason to adjust. Details appear complete enough to require no correction. The scene holds itself together without implying transition.
Light progresses in a way that feels expected and unremarkable.
Nothing within the room suggests that it has moved forward or backward. Object and reflection align without discrepancy.
Visual relationships remain consistent enough to avoid reconsideration.
The environment appears fully accounted for.
The scene communicates continuity rather than change. Attention notes the alignment, then releases it. No indicator suggests that this configuration is new. The present appears settled within itself. Nothing calls attention to any missing transition.
The absence of movement becomes quietly noticeable. Stability persists without drawing attention. The space offers no signal of progression.
Consistency becomes the defining characteristic.
The room offers no evidence of departure. Everything appears exactly where it has been.
The present quietly confirms its continuity.
Observation produces no indication of transition.
The scene sustains itself without resistance.
Nothing suggests that a step forward has occurred.
The room appears steady, confirming that you are still here.
The room remains steady, yet one directional cue no longer agrees with quiet expectation.
Light appears to favor a position that the window does not clearly justify.
Cause and result remain visible, though their connection feels slightly delayed.
Orientation shifts register only after they are already accepted.
Shadow structure begins following a logic that does not fully agree with itself.
Light begins favoring a direction and the window does not sufficiently explain. Reflections begin referencing positions that feel subtly reassigned.
Distance stops functioning as a reliable guide. Surface responses duplicate without a clear initiating cause.
Directional certainty weakens while the environment remains calm.
Light organizes itself into patterns that feel unrequested.
Object posture begins implying adjustment without visible movement. Depth cues quietly exchange their expected roles. Expected gradients reverse without urgency. Correspondence between form and result begins loosening. Single inputs begin producing more than one visual outcome.
Spatial logic bends slightly without collapsing.
Orientation shifts begin feeling selective rather than shared.
Separation between object and surface begins quietly eroding. Light begins referencing the object instead of its source. Distance stops predicting clarity in expected ways. Hierarchies of visual attention quietly dissolve.
Alignment inconsistencies accumulate without escalation. Causal direction becomes quietly ambiguous. The room continues functioning while becoming harder to intuit. The room responds as if its reactions arrive slightly after they should.
Visual effects continue after their apparent causes conclude.
The room begins holding more than one moment at once.
Conflicting time cues coexist without resolving. Cause and effect stop agreeing on when events occur.
Expectation begins arriving before observation confirms it.
Visual information begins repeating instead of refreshing. The moment feels present without feeling current. The room carries visual memory alongside perception.
More than one moment appears to occupy the same visual space.
Effects no longer conclude when their causes end.
Recognition begins arriving after perception.
Time indicators quietly disagree. The present begins feeling slightly retrospective. Object and environment stop feeling simultaneous.
Change begins feeling buffered rather than immediate.
The scene gives the impression of having already occurred.
Temporal reference points slide without direction.
Visual memory overlaps with current input.
The scene feels slightly behind itself.
Completion no longer follows change immediately.
The present stretches without advancing. The room behaves like a memory still forming. The scene appears to wait for itself.
Time no longer occupies a single position within the room.
The room presents itself as complete, without indicating whether this moment has just begun or quietly continued. Visual order settles into a condition that no longer requests interpretation. Elements align into relationships that feel sufficient without explanation. Orientation stabilizes without reference to earlier variation.
Orientation stabilizes without reference to earlier variation.
Balance returns without clarifying what preceded it.
Balance returns without clarifying what preceded it.
Light resumes behavior that no longer invites evaluation.
The light resumes behavior that no longer invites evaluation.
Visual complexity reduces without implying an ending.
Visual complexity reduces without implying an ending.
The environment settles into a readable condition.
The environment settles into a readable condition. Orientation holds without encouraging reinterpretation. Orientation holds without encouraging reinterpretation.
Cause and effect appear reconnected without comment.
Cause and effect appear reconnected without comment.
Spatial logic resumes without drawing focus.
Spatial logic resumes without drawing focus.
Continuity replaces variation. Continuity replaces variation.
The room no longer implies progression. The room no longer implies progression.
Nothing within the frame suggests alteration. Nothing within the frame suggests alteration. The scene feels sufficient without asserting finality.
The scene feels sufficient without asserting finality. Stability persists without indicating duration. Stability persists without indicating duration.
The present loses distinction from other moments.
The present loses distinction from other moments.
Temporal markers lose relevance when repetition feels exact. Temporal markers lose relevance when repetition feels exact.
Recognition replaces curiosity.
Recognition replaces curiosity.
Nothing appears unresolved.
Nothing appears unresolved. The environment offers completion without explanation.
The environment offers completion without explanation. Nothing suggests a next moment.
Nothing suggests a next moment. The scene feels complete in a way that implies recurrence.
The scene feels complete in a way that implies recurrence. Observation no longer produces discovery. Observation no longer produces discovery. The room appears ready to be experienced again. The room appears ready to be experienced again.